From the author of Spinsterella, the strange and unusual romance and spellbound, a darker shade of black comes the legendary Maggie Tilda. Pick up the conclusions of the Spinsterella trilogy in paperback and e-readers this Halloween. Marvel Studios is in trouble. And Marvel Studios is in trouble because there's a clear issue regarding the quality of many of their projects these days. When I look at a lot of Marvel Studios projects these days, such as the back 6 episodes of Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and Spider-Man Homecoming and the Defenders, it's clear to me that there's a decline as it relates to the quality of Marvel Studios projects. And as I look at Phase 3 of these Marvel Studios projects, it's clear to me that Disney really needs to take a minute to correct course on Phase 3, because if they don't correct course on Phase 3, the end of the Marvel Cinematic Universe may come sooner rather than later. And one of the big problems with Marvel Studios these days is that they're putting quantity over quality these days. Instead of taking their time to go out here and produce 1 or 2 quality films over the course of a year or in a single Netflix series, they're rushing out 3 and 4 movies a year and 3 and 4 Netflix television shows a year. And that's just way too much product to be produced over the course of a year, because one of the big problems with producing so much product is that the audience can't digest it all. And when you put out so much product over the course of the year, the audience winds up getting overwhelmed. And when the audience winds up becoming overwhelmed, they start becoming fatigued to the product. This is something that happened back in the 1990s when Disney and Fox and many other studios were producing multiple hand-drawn animation products over the course of a year. And what happened was people started feeling apathetic to these products because so many were coming out at a given time, and they weren't becoming involved in the product. This is why many films didn't get, like Mulan and Tarzan and Home on the Range and Hunchback of Notre Dame, struggled to really get an audience and didn't perform on the level of Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, and Little Mermaid, because so many products were coming out that the audience was starting to become tired of them, and some people in the audience were starting to take them for granted. And with Marvel these days, they're just producing too many products that are related to their cinematic universe and their Netflix series, and the viewers just can't watch them all. The other big problem at Marvel Studios is that they're just the quality of their products has taken a serious decline because they're rushing out so many products. And instead of them making efforts to really try to make efforts to stay true to the source material, like they did in 2008's adaptation of Iron Man, they're starting to cut corners on things and make compromises like they did this year with Spider-Man Homecoming. Instead of giving us a full story that was featuring the Peter Parker from the comics, they decided they wanted to try to change the story, and they made compromises by trying to transpose Miles Morales' story on Peter Parker, and that led to a really poor quality viewing experience, and it really showed how they compromised their standard for making Marvel Studios film, because originally with these Marvel Studios film there was always an effort to stay true to the source material and stay true to the characters. But with Spider-Man Homecoming there was a serious attempt to try to change the source material, and that led to a really bad viewing experience and a really weak story. The other big problem that they're having with all this rushing out of stuff is that they're not really taking time to focus on presenting the right actor for the role. And we saw that with Netflix's Iron Fist. When I look at Finn Jones, he's just not the right guy to play Iron Fist. And he really was struggling with the role of Danny Rand. And the writing on these films and television shows is also slipping because they're rushing out so many products. And because they're rushing out so many products, many of their scripts have many mistakes that many first-year screenwriters make when they're writing their first screenplays. Because when I was watching Spider-Man Homecoming, I saw numerous scenes where they were telling instead of showing. And when you have a scene with telling, you have a lot of people talking, and they're telling us what's going on, and we're not seeing what's going on in pictures. And I saw that in Spider-Man: Homecoming, and I saw that in numerous Netflix shows like The Back Six of Luke Cage, like Jessica Jones, and especially in Iron Fist and The Defenders. I clearly saw a decline in the quality of the writing on these Marvel Studios projects, with the telling instead of showing, the constant use of exposition and expository sequences to explain things instead of letting us just see the action going on. And it's clear to me from the Netflix shows that a lot of people at Marvel Studios don't understand that if you're making an action show, we need to see action. We don't go there to see people talking. Again, this is a first year screenwriter mistake when you have people talking on screen constantly. That's called talking heads. And when you have a scene that's filled with talking heads, that shows that there's a serious problem with your script, because you should not have scenes where people are just sitting there talking constantly, because that really slows down the pace of a motion picture. And I saw that in Iron Fist, and I saw that in Defenders, used extensively. Danny Rand just sits there and he tells stories, but we don't get to see anything on screen except him sitting there telling a story. And in Defenders, you have these characters going back and forth, and they're not really doing anything. Film is a visual medium, and people need to see people doing something. Characters are not what they say, they are what they do, and action defines character. And we're not seeing much action defining characters on screen when it relates to Marvel Studios projects. I remember watching Spider-Man: Homecoming, and there were at least 3 or 4 sequences where he's just sitting around in the neighborhood goofing off, and that's not Spider-Man. People want to see him swinging webs. They want to see him webbing up criminals. They want to see action. They don't want to see, Saved by the Bell version of Spider-Man where he's just in the neighborhood looking for something to happen. They want to see something happen. This is a visual medium, and action, again, it's all about action when you have an action series. And Marvel Studios has been slipping on the action, and they've been slipping in terms of the writing, because they've been bringing in a lot of first-year screenwriters, and again, their mistakes are clearly showing up to me on screen in many of their projects. They're just not really focusing on the quality of what's going on the screen, and the action is just not on the screen. All we're hearing is talky scenes of talking heads, people telling us what is happening, and we need to see action as it relates to an action show. And really, what they really need to do is start producing a lot less projects on this Phase 3, because as I see it, you're producing too many products, and when you rush too many products out, that's when you start getting sloppy, that's when your standards start slipping, and that's when you start really making products that really do not make your brand look good. Right now, Marvel Studios is making stuff to get the short dollar, but at the customer's expense, but they're not thinking about the long-term value of the brand. Because when you think about the long-term value of the brand, you're going to think about the quality of products that you're producing, and whether they meet the standard you have established for your product. And when I look at Marvel Studios right now, they're just rushing stuff out to get towards this Infinity War and that $500 million budget. But if you're producing poor quality products, what's happening is, with all the products being interconnected, is the weak links that are going to do damage to your brand. And I look at a lot of the products they're producing right now, and they're producing a lot of weak links, and those weak links may break the chain for the stories, and we may not get the big audience for Infinity War. And this is the mistake that Marvel is making right now, and it's leaving them very vulnerable as I see it, because when you're not focused on the quality of your product, what happens is other companies and other competitors are going to see the weak spots that I've been spotting, and they're going to start developing campaigns and creating different products to compete with you. They're not going to see you as the big threat that Marvel Studios was back in 2008 with Iron Man, Captain America, and the Avengers. Now they're seeing, oh, Marvel Studios is vulnerable. we can now start producing products. And they better thank God that Warner Brothers and DC still has not gotten their game together, or else they would have been able to really make some inroads against them in the terms of competition. And as I see it right now, that this is the perfect opportunity for one of the other studios out here to start releasing one of these smaller indie movies or a different type of movie like a romantic comedy or a comedy, because there's a chance you might actually do perform fairly strongly at the box office against one of these Marvel Studios movies due to the quality decline on these Marvel Studios films as it relates to the quality of the adaptation of the source material, the casting of the actors, and most importantly, the screenwriting. And the screenwriting on many of these Marvel Studios films has been extremely poor, and especially on these Netflix shows where they have just rushed things out too quickly. And when you rush stuff out too quickly, what happens is you're going to get stuff of varying quality, just like we did with the hand-drawn animation of the 90s. And that's going to, again, lead to the audience winding up feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, and in some cases, just fatigued and tired of this genre, like they were with those hand-drawn animated movies of the 90s. A lot of people are starting to feel the fatigue from these superhero movies and shows, and they're looking for something different. Now, again, this is an opportunity for other studios to come in with something fresh, something different, and really knock something out of the park. The Marvel Studios is quite vulnerable. They're in a lot of trouble. Only the executives at the top don't know how much trouble they're in, because when you rush out too much product, you will have these quality control issues, and if you don't take efforts to try to fix the course, you're really going to start really headed towards a serious decline. I know about this from personal experience because in 2013, when I was working on the SJS Direct imprint, I published 13 books that year, and I started to see that I was putting out too much product too fast. And when I was looking at one of my books, Isis, My Sister, My Frenemy, I started to see where I was making serious mistakes with quality control, and that's when I decided to pull back. And once I pulled back and I started to slow things down, that's when I was able to get things right regarding quality control as related to stories, making sure that the plots were rock solid. Because Isis, My Sister, My Frenemy had a very rock solid plot, but there was a whole bunch of grammatical errors and typos, and that was my fault because I rushed product out. And as I looked at many of the 2013 books, I started to see the quality control issues. And towards the second half of 2013, which was around July to December, I really started to slow things down, and I started to focus on quality control. And this is something that Marvel Studios isn't doing right now, and it's something they desperately need to do right now. They need to slow it down, start focusing on their quality control, and start focusing on producing less and have that has a stronger impact instead of producing more and then fatiguing the audience. Because if you produce one or two movies a year that wind up getting good reviews and good box office, it can have a stronger impact on the brand, and it can prolong the longevity of the brand and the genre. Because when you focus on the long term aspects of it and focus on the quality, you will wind up getting a larger quantity of viewers and maintaining a larger audience all over the world. When I look at the products they're producing right now, it's clear to me they're in the same place I was in 2013 when I had released 13 books, and the quality, yet the stories were great, but the quality of them were of varying degrees as it related to issues of spelling, punctuation, and grammar. And once I pulled it back for the second half of 2013, I was able to increase the quality of many of those books. And the books that were produced later in the year still managed to sell a lot stronger, like Isis All About the Goddess and The Misadventures of Captain Save-A-Ho. Those books continued to consistently sell well because I took a moment to pull back on my quality control issues and focus on them. And since then, I was able to, recover and regroup because I was able to acknowledge the problem and admit the problem. But I look at Marvel Studios and they really have not done that, and they really need to get out there and admit that there's a problem, because I look at the quality of the products they're producing, and it's clear to me that they're rushing out too much stuff, and they're not looking at the quality of that stuff, of those films and those TV shows, because it's clear to me they're far below par, and they just don't meet the high standard that was established in Marvel Studios back in 2008 with Iron Man, and 2010 with Iron Man 2 and Captain America: The First Avenger. If you like what you see on this channel, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you like to try some of the SJS Direct Universe titles, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.